Now, last week, we revealed the remarkable investigation by Forbidden Storeis and the continent into The Company, a Russian propaganda network run by the country's intelligence services. Leaked documents showed dozens of operatives spreading disinformation across Africa and Latin America, paying media and journalists directly to promote anti-West and pro-Russian narratives, all the while reshaping the political landscape with a budget of over 7 million euros. This Friday, the second publication of the series has just come out, identifying 60 of the Russian operatives in question. It also reveals exactly how this infamous propaganda network moved from a simple Wagner operation to being secretly led directly from the Kremlin. Well, we have the opportunity now to bring into the conversation editor-in-chief at The Continent, Lydia Namubiru. Also here on set, we'll be speaking to Léa Perruchon, the author of the report for Forbidden Storeis. Thank you so much for joining us, both to you, Léa and Lydia. Léa, I'm just going to start with you because we did have you on set last week with the first publication, talking about the paid media and how this propaganda message has spread. What are we looking at in this latest edition?
We decided to work more on the network and on the Russian agents behind this overall network. And last week we showed the global one, we showed the operative on the ground, we showed what were their activities, and now we are really going deep into detail on the operatives based in Russia and elsewhere.
And this is all from a leak which arrived at the doorstep of Lydia Namubiru. Lydia, I'm assuming you can't tell us exactly how you got this leak, but now we have the first set of Russian operatives that we can actually name. Just how far-reaching is all of this? I mean, you yourself are very much focused on the African continent. Which countries are most affected?
So I think it will come as no surprise to anyone that the biggest mission in Africa remains the Central African Republic, where the Wagner mercenaries, the military arm of Wagner, was already involved for years in supporting the regime in the Central African Republic. Is also where they are most concentrated in terms of operatives on the ground. But you also have quite a few of them in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso. Again, no surprise. The Russian operatives worked really hard to incubate a breakaway regional bloc. That's the alliance of Sahelian countries that broke away from the ECOWAS, so they remain very invested in that project and in continuing to have a lot of influence there, where they're also supporting, they also have military business supporting the regimes, all of which are military regimes. So those are the countries where the activities are most intense. A bit surprisingly is South Africa. They are very, very invested in South Africa and at least claim to have support from South Africa's ruling party, the National African Congress, the Liberation Party that's been in power since democracy started in South Africa.
And Léa, we've seen, we spoke about the methods that they were using even against the opposition of the African National Congress last week. So it is so intricate, and this has been led by, well, we originally said 3 operatives, now it's been expanded to 60. Tell me about these guys who we have just found out about in the second article.
So basically, we had access, thanks to the leak, to some biographies of those guys. So we had the head of the different section of this operation. And now what we reveal is that they are, so for example, to give you an idea, in May 2024, thanks to the document, we see that they were 98 persons working on the project, based either in Russia or in Latin America or in Africa. And you have media manager, you have analysts, you have a PR person, you have different type of specialists that altogether can spread disinformation, misinformation, and Russian narratives in those countries.
And Lydia, when they do spread that kind of disinformation, just how effective is it in Africa? And to speak to me about some of the instances which you have found to really capture the attention of the society there, in which they've really worked to spread anti-Western propaganda.
I think more than even sell any one of their narratives, what it does is it makes it makes people feel that everything is narrative now. There's no truth. Whatever you might know is someone's side of the narrative war. So I think that's the biggest impact so far, is this kind of devaluation of facts and truth, and reduction of everything to mere narrative. That's the biggest impact. However, some of the biggest messages they've tried to push are Ukraine is supporting terrorists in Africa. Opposition politicians are typically allied with the West. So it's sort of the delegitimization of opposition politics by linking them to Western interests or foreign interests. And they tend to be very pro whoever the incumbent is, which is, except in the Sahel where they supported coup leaders, they tend to be they tend to negotiate their way into access to and allyship with incumbents. So, and then delegitimize anyone who is seeking to oppose a current regime. So those feel like the biggest pursuits. And yeah.
And Lydia's talking there about Wagner, and this is a really fundamental facet to this, because it was something started back in the early 2010s by Wagner, this company, but it only really took off, if we can say, after the death of Prigozhin. And now it's been integrated into the information network, into really the Russian spy network, if we can say. Just speak to me on that point, because this is a fundamental tenet as well of this new publication, just about that transition from Wagner to the Kremlin itself.
So there were assumptions of some foreign intelligence services from Russia taking over from the network. And now we have the proof. So basically, what we can say is that there is some ex-Wagner, like Prigozhin Galaxy members that are part of this network. And after the death of Prigozhin in August 2023, the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service, took over the network. And we have different we had access at Forbidden Storeis to different documents, especially on the financial aspects between the SVR and politology, or the company. And so that's why we are able to say that they really took over this network. And this is huge, because it was like kept secret.
These are names like Sergei Mashkevich, he's the global project director. We've got Sergei Klukin, he is the head of the analysis department. Dmitry Fadev, that's the SVR general and former deputy to the agency's director. I mean, these are really big names, and they're very close to the Kremlin as we speak. I don't suppose that you yourself are worried about your position when you reveal the identities of guys like these.
I don't think so. I mean, the point for us was really to go deep in this network and to understand the network. What's super important for me and for Forbidden Storeis, and I'm sure for the whole consortium, is to show the reality behind this network. Because I remember when I was working on the previous investigation with a journalist in Central African Republic, he was really scared. And there is a lot of journalists scared on the ground, because they used to work with them, or they are in the network and they can't go out. And so I think our responsibilities as journalists and our mission is to show this network so that people on the ground know who are in their country, basically.
But Lydia, you know, critics and maybe pro-Kremlin critics at that are going to point to the fact that the West has also tried to employ some level of influence across the African continent and places like Bolivia. So why is this a problem when Russia tries to do the same? It's just part of their strategy. What's so nefarious about this?
I would say, yeah, sure. All nation states have interests and they pursue them. So I would say that's also the argument for reporting about it. If it is something that happens all the time, then it should be happening in the open. And what has happened until now is that there's been a lot of secrecy about how the Russian state is going about its interests. This is working with all shadowy networks rather than working, you know, openly. Yes, part of the reason we know about the West and its interests and how it pursues those interests is transparency that is pushed for both by journalism in the West, but also public policies that mean many Western funders, for instance, of media do so transparently. They do so institutionally, not to individual journalists, and journalists who receive that support will own up to it, as will the funders. So again, it's whether or not it's different, it is transparency is always good. And this is partly what this reporting is trying to achieve. But at the same time, it's quite different. And I think there's a reason why it is done without a lot of transparency. It is, first of all, you're working with operatives who are also very closely linked to an organization that is doing mercenary work, has been accused of human rights violations. That's different from how other nation states tend to pursue their interests. You're pushing for laws that very specifically serve your interests, like mining laws that will push out corporations from unfriendly countries, I suppose, and you're going about it by bypassing any kind of public participation.
Lydia,
all of that
I'm
is
so
different.
sorry. We're going to have to cut you there because that is where this interview ends. But we will find out more, I'm sure, in further publications to come. Thank you so much, both Lydia Namubiru and Léa Perrouchon, for this amazing investigation into what's going on in the Russian propaganda network.